Have you ever felt like you were being watched, but no one believed in your strength? Imagine being accused of something you didn't do, humiliated in front of everyone, but you remain silent. Because you know, one day, everything will change. Emily Carter never expected her ordinary life to collide with something so dark. As a high school teacher, she had built a life based on kindness, understanding, and an unwavering belief in justice. Her days were spent in a small classroom, teaching history to bright, curious minds. Her colleagues knew her as a kind woman, but also as someone who wasn't easily intimidated. She didn't flaunt her life, nor did she seek attention. She was content with her humble routines. But that all changed the day Officer John Mitchell decided to make an example of her. It started on a quiet Thursday afternoon when Emily was asked to come down to the local police station to help with a minor inquiry about a missing student. She thought it would be just another quick errand. What she didn't know was that Officer Mitchell had other plans. When she arrived at the station, he immediately began to question her, asking about the student as if she were somehow involved in their disappearance. At first, Emily thought it was just standard procedure, but the questions quickly became more pointed. "Are you sure you don't know where the student is?" Mitchell asked, his tone growing more aggressive. Emily, taken aback, shook her head. "I told you, Officer Mitchell, I don't know anything about it. I'm just here to help." "Is that so?" He sneered. "Because I'm starting to think you're hiding something. Maybe you've been in touch with the student more than you let on." Emily's heart sank. She had done nothing wrong, yet here she was, accused of something she couldn't understand. She felt a wave of humiliation sweep over her, but she refused to show it. She stood her ground, silently enduring the barrage of unfounded accusations. The more she stayed quiet, the more Mitchell pushed. He began to publicly humiliate her, calling her incompetent and questioning her character in front of his fellow officers. He even hinted that perhaps she was involved in something much darker. Emily's face flushed with anger, but she remained calm. She knew this wasn't her fight. She had to wait. She had to be patient. But deep down, she was also aware of something Mitchell didn't know. She wasn't alone in this. Emily had a husband, a man who was far more powerful than Mitchell could ever imagine. Mark Carter, Emily's husband, was the police chief. While Emily sat there, enduring the ridicule, Mark had been quietly observing the situation from a distance. He had received an anonymous tip-off that his wife was being unfairly targeted, and now he was watching. The one man who could destroy Officer Mitchell's career was sitting silently, waiting for the right moment to step in. As Emily's humiliation reached its peak, Mark walked into the room, his presence instantly commanding attention. He didn't have to say a word. Just the sight of him caused the room to fall silent. Officer Mitchell froze, his arrogant smirk faltering as he recognized the police chief standing before him. Mark glanced at his wife, then turned his gaze to Mitchell, who now seemed small and insignificant. "You're done, Mitchell," Mark said quietly, but his voice carried the weight of authority. The room went silent. Emily stood up, finally looking Mitchell in the eye, her composure unshaken. She didn't need to defend herself anymore. The truth had already arrived, and it was clear that the power had shifted. Officer Mitchell, once so confident and ruthless, was now a man facing the consequences of his actions. And Emily, the woman he had tried to tear down, was now the one standing tall. Emily sat at the small cafe in the corner of the local park, staring at the steaming cup of coffee in front of her. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden hue over everything. It was the kind of evening she would normally enjoy with her husband, Mark. But today, her mind was racing, replaying the events of the morning at the police station. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just shifted. A few hours ago, she had been humiliated in front of strangers, her character questioned, and her name dragged through the mud. But now, as the dust settled and the adrenaline wore off, she knew she had to face what had happened. She had to figure out what came next. Mark had left the station earlier, still in shock from seeing his wife so publicly ridiculed. He had handled the situation with a calmness that only someone in his position could. But Emily knew that things couldn't go back to normal after today. The way Mitchell had treated her was unacceptable, and even though Mark had come to her defense, Emily was still processing the impact of it all. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. She reached for it, seeing Mark's name flashing on the screen. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual, though she could feel the tension in her voice. "Hey, Emily." Mark's voice was steady, though she could hear a slight edge to it. "I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I know today was a lot." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her. "I'm fine," she lied, though she knew it wasn't entirely true. "Just trying to process everything." "What about you?" "I'm okay," Mark replied, his voice softening. "I'm more concerned about you, though. I don't want you to feel like you have to carry this alone." Emily smiled faintly, grateful for his concern. But she also knew that she had to take control of the situation to stand up for herself. "Mark, I know you did what you had to do today, but I can't just sit back and let this go." Mitchell crossed a line, and I won't let him get away with it. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Emily could almost hear Mark's thoughts. "I know," he said finally, "and I won't let him either. We'll handle this together, Emily." Emily's heart swelled at his words. She knew he had her back, just as he always had. But this was her fight too. She couldn't just hide behind her husband's authority. She had to make sure Mitchell understood that his actions had consequences. "I'm not going to let Mitchell get away with making me feel small," she said, her voice more determined now. "I'll go to the press, file a complaint, whatever it takes. I won't let him get away with humiliating me like that." Mark sighed, but she could hear the pride in his voice. "I knew you were strong, Emily. I'll be right there with you, but this is your fight. I'll support you in whatever you need." Emily smiled, feeling a surge of confidence. For the first time since the incident, she felt like she was taking control. It wasn't just about her dignity. It was about standing up for herself and showing everyone, especially Mitchell, that she wouldn't let anyone push her around. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings with her lawyer, preparing her statement and gathering evidence. Emily didn't want to make this about revenge, but she needed to ensure that no one, especially someone in a position of power, would think they could get away with treating her like that. She knew it wasn't going to be easy, and she wasn't naive enough to think that the road ahead would be smooth. But she was ready, and soon, Mitchell would realize just how wrong he was to think that he could break her. The day of her press conference arrived. Emily stood at the podium, a calm determination in her eyes. She had prepared for this moment. She wasn't going to let Mitchell or anyone else make her feel like less than what she was, a woman who had every right to be respected. As she spoke to the gathered reporters, she felt the weight of her husband's support behind her, but more importantly, she felt the strength within herself. She was no longer just the woman in the background. She was Emily Carter, and no one would ever make her feel small again. As the days passed, Emily found herself immersed in the process of not only clearing her name, but also making sure that no one would ever treat her like that again. The press conference had been a turning point, but it was only the beginning. The media coverage of her story had spread far beyond the small town she lived in. She had received messages of support from people she had never met, and even some from people who had been in similar situations. It was overwhelming at times, but also empowering. Emily had never considered herself a hero, but now, as she read the messages, she realized that her story was inspiring others to stand up for themselves. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Mark. "Hey, how are you holding up?" he asked, his voice calm but filled with concern. Emily smiled softly, even though she knew he couldn't see it. "I'm okay. Just a bit overwhelmed, you know? But I'm doing this for myself, and for everyone else who's been silenced." Mark paused for a moment, then spoke with a quiet intensity. "I'm proud of you, Emily. You've got this. You're doing the right thing." Emily felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Mark had always been there for her, but in that moment, she realized just how much his support meant to her. "Thanks, Mark. I couldn't do this without you. You don't have to do it alone. But I also know that you're strong enough to handle this on your own," he said. "Just keep going, and I'll be right here." His words gave her the strength she needed to move forward. Emily knew that Mitchell wouldn't back down easily, but she wasn't going to let him have the last word. She was ready to fight, not just for herself, but for the truth. A few days later, Emily sat across from her lawyer, reviewing the evidence they had gathered. There was no doubt in her mind that Mitchell had crossed a line, but Emily needed to be sure that everything was airtight before they moved forward. Her lawyer, a sharp and experienced woman named Sarah, had been instrumental in guiding her through this process. "We have a solid case, Emily," Sarah said, her eyes scanning the documents in front of her. "But we need to make sure we hit them where it hurts." Emily nodded, her determination growing. I won't back down. He needs to be held accountable for what he did. Sarah smiled. And he will be. You're doing the right thing. Over the next week, they filed the complaint, prepared the legal documents, and scheduled their next steps. Emily didn't have time to dwell on the stress. She was focused, more determined than ever to make sure Mitchell faced the consequences of his actions. The story was bigger than just her now. It had become a symbol of resilience and the power of standing up against those who think they can get away with anything. Finally, the day came when they were ready to take Mitchell to court. Emily stood in the courthouse, her heart pounding in her chest, but her head held high. She knew this wasn't going to be easy, but she also knew that the truth was on her side. As she entered the courtroom, she saw Mitchell sitting at the defendant's table, his expression unreadable. Emily didn't flinch. She was ready for this. Her lawyer stood beside her, and together, they presented the evidence. The witnesses who had seen the humiliation unfold, the documents that proved Mitchell's actions were unlawful. All of it came together in a powerful case that left Mitchell with no way out. As the proceedings went on, Emily's nerves slowly turned to a quiet strength. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for anyone who had ever been silenced, dismissed, or disrespected. And as the case wrapped up, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. She had done it. She had stood up to the injustice and had won. The judge's ruling was clear. Mitchell was guilty, and he would be held accountable for his actions. The sense of relief that washed over Emily was overwhelming. She had taken control of her life, and now, she could move forward without the weight of Mitchell's cruelty hanging over her. As she left the courthouse, Mark was waiting for her outside, a proud smile on his face. You did it, Emily. You showed them all what it means to be strong. Emily smiled back, the weight of the past few weeks lifting from her shoulders. We did it, Mark. We did it together. She knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one where she would never allow anyone to make her feel small again. The days following the court ruling felt surreal to Emily. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life, and now that it had arrived, she couldn't help but wonder what came next. She had stood up for herself and had won. The weight that had been pressing down on her for weeks had finally lifted, but there was still a lingering question in her mind. What was the next chapter of her life going to look like? Mark had been by her side every step of the way, and although she was grateful for his support, Emily knew that she couldn't rely on him to fix everything. This victory had been her own, and now it was time for her to embrace the future. She had always been the woman in the background, the one who quietly observed while others took the spotlight. But now, she had a voice, and it was time to use it. Emily sat down in her office one evening, reviewing her notes and the events of the past few weeks. The legal victory had felt incredible, but there was still so much more she wanted to accomplish. The media had been following her every move, and she had become something of a local hero. Her story had inspired others to stand up for themselves, and Emily felt a sense of responsibility to keep that momentum going. The idea of using her newfound platform to make a difference had crossed her mind, and now it felt like the right time to act. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had been avoiding for a few days. It was Sarah, her lawyer. Hey, Sarah, Emily said when the call connected. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I think it's time for me to do more than just move on. I want to help others, the way I was helped. I want to be a voice for those who can't speak up for themselves. Sarah was silent for a moment, then responded with a smile in her voice. Emily, that's exactly what I've been hoping you'd say. You've got the strength, and now you have the platform. There's so much you can do with it. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she realized just how much potential she had to change the world around her. She had always been passionate about helping others, but now she had the opportunity to take that passion to the next level. I don't know where to start, she admitted, but I know that I can't just let this moment pass by. You don't have to know everything right now, Sarah reassured her. Start small, but take the first step. And don't be afraid to speak your truth. You've already proven how powerful that can be. Emily thought about her journey and how far she had come. From the moment she had been humiliated by Officer Mitchell, she had felt like her world was falling apart. But now, she could see that it had all been leading her to this point. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for a cause that was bigger than her. Okay, Emily said, her voice steady and determined. I'll start with my story. I'll go public with everything. How I was treated, how I fought back, and how anyone else can do the same. Sarah's voice was filled with pride. That's the spirit. Your story can change lives, Emily. And I'll be here to help you every step of the way. As the conversation ended, Emily sat back in her chair, the weight of her decision sinking in. She wasn't just going to let this victory be a one-time thing. She was going to use her voice to bring about real change. She could feel the power of it already. It was a responsibility, yes, but also an incredible opportunity. Over the next few weeks, Emily began to share her story with the world. She worked with Sarah to write articles, record interviews, and speak at local events. She became a symbol of courage and resilience. And the more she spoke out, the more she realized just how many people were touched by her words. She wasn't alone in this fight. There were countless others who had been silenced, dismissed, and overlooked. But now, they had someone who would stand up for them, someone who had been where they were and had come out stronger on the other side. Emily's platform grew, and soon, she was being invited to speak on national news outlets. Her message was clear. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, and no one should ever feel powerless in the face of injustice. As she stood in front of a camera one afternoon, preparing to speak to millions of viewers, Emily realized that she had become the person she had always hoped she would be. Strong, confident, and unafraid to speak the truth. She wasn't just Emily Carter anymore. She was a voice for change, and she was ready to use it. The weeks following her rise to national attention felt like a whirlwind for Emily. Her story had gone viral, and what had started as a personal battle against injustice had now turned into a powerful movement. Everywhere she went, people recognized her, not just for what she had been through, but for what she was doing now. She was no longer just a teacher. She was a symbol of strength and perseverance. Emily knew she had to use her newfound platform wisely. She had spoken at local events, shared her story on news channels, and written articles that inspired countless individuals to stand up for themselves. But as her voice grew louder, so did the pressure. With every success, the responsibility weighed heavier on her shoulders. She found herself working late into the night, balancing interviews, public appearances, and her everyday life. Mark was there, of course, offering his unwavering support, but Emily could feel the toll it was taking on both of them. "You're doing amazing things, Emily," Mark said one evening as they sat together in their living room. He had just returned from a long shift at the police station, but he still took the time to check in on her. Emily smiled softly, grateful for his presence. "I don't know how you managed to do all of this," he added, glancing at the stack of papers on the table and the phone buzzing beside her. "I don't feel like I'm managing it. Sometimes it feels like everything is slipping away from me," Emily admitted, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But I know I have to keep going. I can't stop now." Mark reached across the table and gently took her hand. "You don't have to do it all by yourself. I'm here always." Emily squeezed his hand, appreciating the gesture. She knew Mark was right, but a part of her felt like she was meant to carry this burden alone. As the media attention continued to grow, Emily decided to take the next step. She had always believed in the power of education, and now, more than ever, she felt compelled to bring that message to a larger audience. With Mark's encouragement, she reached out to various organizations, offering to speak at schools, community centers, and workshops. The response was overwhelming. Emily was invited to speak at events across the country, her message resonating with people of all ages and backgrounds. As she traveled from city to city, she saw firsthand the impact she was making. People who had been silent for so long were now finding their voices, speaking out against the injustices they had endured. One afternoon, after finishing a speaking engagement at a high school, Emily sat down with a group of students who had come up to meet her. They were eager to talk about her experiences, to ask how she had found the strength to keep going. Emily listened intently, offering words of encouragement. "The road won't always be easy," she told them. "But the moment you stop fighting, you give up your power. Keep speaking up. Keep standing tall. Your voice matters." As Emily spoke, she could see the light in their eyes. These were young people who had been told their whole lives that their voices didn't matter, that they were too small to make a difference. But now, they were learning that their voices were powerful. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she thought about everything she had accomplished. It hadn't been easy. There had been sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times when she wanted to give up. But through it all, she had persevered. She had found her voice, and in doing so, she had helped others find theirs. Emily knew that her journey was far from over. There was still so much work to be done. She had become a leader, a beacon of hope for those who had been silenced for too long. And with every step she took, she could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. But now, it was a weight she was proud to carry. She had proven to herself and to the world that she was not just Emily Carter, the woman who had been humiliated. She was Emily Carter, a force to be reckoned with. And she would continue to fight for justice, for herself, and for everyone who needed a voice. As Emily continued to travel, speaking to people about her experiences and sharing her message of hope and resilience, she began to realize just how much her life had changed. The woman who had once been silenced, humiliated, and overlooked was now standing tall, using her voice to inspire others. It wasn't easy, though. The pressures of public life weighed on her. Each speech, each interview, seemed to take something out of her, but it also filled her with a deep sense of purpose. She had found a new calling. One evening, after a particularly long day of speaking at a community event, Emily found herself sitting on a park bench, her mind racing with the thoughts of everything she had accomplished and everything that still lay ahead. It had been a few months since the press conference, and although the buzz surrounding her story had started to die down, Emily knew that her journey was far from over. She had taken down Mitchell, yes, but there were still so many other injustices in the world that needed to be addressed. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, allowing herself to appreciate the quiet moment. It was rare, and she knew she needed to take it when she could. "Hey," Mark's voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see him walking toward her, a smile spreading across his face. Emily stood up to greet him, feeling a rush of warmth as she wrapped her arms around him. "Long day?" she asked, sensing the exhaustion in his eyes. "Just another day," Mark replied, though his voice held a hint of weariness. "But I'm here now. How about you? You've been doing this for months now. How are you holding up?" Emily smiled, grateful for his concern. "I'm good. Tired, but good," she said, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I think I finally realized that this is my new normal. Speaking up for others, helping people find their voices, it's exhausting, but it's also the most rewarding thing I've ever done." Mark nodded, his eyes filled with pride. "You've made such a difference, Emily. I don't think you even realize how many lives you've touched. You're not just a voice for the people, you're a beacon of hope for so many." Emily glanced down at her feet, feeling a surge of emotion. "I never thought this would be my life. I was just a teacher, you know? But now, it feels like I'm meant to do this. I'm not just fighting for me anymore. I'm fighting for everyone who has been silenced, for everyone who feels powerless." Mark reached out and gently took her hand. "And you're doing it. Every day, you're showing them that they don't have to stay silent, that they can stand up no matter what." Emily smiled, the exhaustion from the day starting to fade away in the warmth of Mark's support. "I think I need to slow down, though," she said, looking around at the peaceful park around them. "Maybe I need to find a balance. I've been so focused on helping others that I've lost sight of taking care of myself." Mark's expression softened. "You deserve to take care of yourself, too, Emily. You can't pour from an empty cup. Maybe it's time to step back for a little while, recharge, and focus on what you need." Emily nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She knew Mark was right. She had been so focused on her mission that she had forgotten to take care of herself. "Maybe you're right. I need to find that balance, for my own sake." Mark smiled, pulling her closer. "And when you do, you'll come back even stronger." Emily leaned into his embrace, feeling the comfort of his words sink in. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face it. She had found her voice, and no matter what came next, she knew that she could continue to stand up for justice, for herself, and for everyone who needed a voice. It was a new chapter in her life, one that she had earned, and one that she was ready to write. The next day, as Emily sat at her desk, reviewing her schedule for the coming weeks, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She was still an advocate for those who couldn't speak for themselves, but now, she was also going to take the time to focus on her own well-being. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Emily knew that no matter how hard the road ahead might be, she had the strength to keep going. She had already proven that to herself. And as she looked out the window, she realized that her journey was only just beginning. Emily sat quietly in her office, the soft hum of the air conditioner the only sound breaking the stillness. She had decided to take some time off to recharge, but even in the comfort of her own home, the weight of the world still seemed to rest on her shoulders. Her mind often wandered back to the journey she had been on. From the moment she had been wronged, humiliated in public, to the point where she had risen above it all, there had been so many ups and downs. Yet, despite everything, she had found herself stronger than ever. Mark had been her rock, supporting her through every decision, every challenge. But now, as she sat alone in the quiet room, she knew it was time to take control of her own story. No more letting others dictate her path. She had become a symbol of resilience and change, but Emily also realized that her work wasn't finished. There were still so many people out there, still so many stories to be told. She had made a promise to herself to not just be a voice for others, but to make sure that voice could reach as far and wide as possible. With every new day, Emily grew more determined to make an impact, to help others who were still struggling to find their way. One evening, while going through some papers, Emily came across a letter that had been sent to her weeks ago. It was from a young woman named Sarah, who had been following Emily's story from the very beginning. Sarah's letter spoke of her own struggles, how she had been overlooked and dismissed by those around her, how she felt silenced by a system that didn't seem to care about her voice. Reading Sarah's words, Emily felt a deep connection. She had been in that place, once, feeling small, invisible, and powerless. But now, with everything she had learned, with all the strength she had gained, Emily knew she could help. Sarah's letter was the push Emily needed. She couldn't sit idly by anymore, not when there were people who still needed her. She had made the decision long ago to be a voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves, but now she realized that it was time to step up even more. That night, she picked up her phone and called Mark. "Mark, I've been thinking," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "I want to start something bigger. I want to create a foundation, an organization, something that helps people like Sarah. People who need a voice, who need guidance, who need someone to stand by them." Mark was quiet for a moment before responding. "Emily, that's incredible. You've already done so much, but I know you have the heart and the drive to make this happen." "I need your help," Emily admitted. "I can't do this alone." "You don't have to," Mark reassured her. "You've got this, and I'll be here to help however I can." The next few months were filled with planning, organizing, and reaching out to others who shared Emily's vision. She knew she couldn't do it all on her own, but with Mark's support and the help of a few trusted individuals, Emily was able to lay the groundwork for the foundation she had always dreamed of. The foundation's mission was simple: to empower individuals who had been silenced, overlooked, or mistreated, and to help them find the courage and resources they needed to fight for their rights. Emily knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was determined. She had already fought for herself. Now, it was time to fight for others. As the foundation's website launched, Emily felt a wave of emotion. She had come so far, from the quiet woman in the background to a leader with a cause. People were beginning to take notice of her efforts, and she knew that the work was just beginning. But she also knew that no matter how tough it got, she would keep fighting. This was her purpose, her calling, and she wouldn't stop until she had made a difference. It wasn't just about her story anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been overlooked, dismissed, or silenced. Emily Carter had found her voice, and she was going to use it to change the world, one person at a time. Emily stood in front of a packed auditorium, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the culmination of everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for. The crowd was filled with people from all walks of life, students, professionals, community leaders, each one there to hear her story. She had spoken at smaller events before, but this was different. This was a major milestone for her foundation, and the pressure weighed heavily on her. The lights in the room dimmed slightly, and she stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphone. A moment of silence passed, and then, with a deep breath, Emily began. "Thank you all for being here today," she started, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I stand before you as a woman who has faced humiliation, injustice, and doubt. But I am not just here to talk about what happened to me. I am here to share what I've learned, and to help others who are still suffering in silence." As she spoke, Emily's mind raced through the events that had brought her here. The moment she had been wronged, the humiliation in front of strangers, the quiet strength she had found within herself, and the incredible support from Mark and others who believed in her. It had all led to this moment, where she could now speak to a room full of people who needed to hear what she had to say. When I was first humiliated, I wanted to shrink. I wanted to hide from the world. But I realized something that changed everything. The world does not define my worth. I do. We do. All of us have the power to stand up for ourselves, no matter how small or insignificant we may feel at times. The audience sat in rapt attention, and Emily could see the glint of understanding in their eyes. They were with her. She was no longer the quiet woman in the back of the room, waiting to be heard. She was the one speaking now, and they were listening. And that's why I started this foundation. Emily continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. It's not just about me. It's about all of us. It's about everyone who has been silenced, who has been made to feel small, who has been told they don't matter. We matter. We all matter. A surge of emotion welled up inside her as she spoke those words. She wasn't just telling her story anymore. She was telling theirs. She was speaking for the countless individuals who had suffered in silence, for the ones who hadn't found their voice yet. I know what it feels like to be ignored, to be dismissed, to be treated like you don't matter. But I also know that we all have the strength to rise above it. We have the power to change the narrative, to stand up, and to say no more. As Emily spoke, she could feel the weight of her own journey lifting. She wasn't just telling her story, she was giving others permission to tell theirs. She was showing them that they, too, had the strength to fight back, to be heard, and to make a difference. The room was silent, except for the sound of Emily's voice and the occasional shift in the seats. Her words hung in the air, powerful and undeniable. And that's why I am here today, to tell you that you are not alone, to tell you that your voice matters, to tell you that no matter what anyone else says, you have the right to stand tall, to speak your truth, and to fight for what's right. Emily paused, letting her words settle over the audience. She knew this wasn't the end of her journey. It was just the beginning. But for the first time, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had found her purpose, and she was using it to help others find theirs. Together, we can change the world. One voice at a time, she finished, her voice steady and strong. As the room erupted into applause, Emily felt a sense of pride wash over her. She had done it. She had made it to this point, and she knew that she would continue to fight for justice, for herself, and for everyone who needed a voice. Mark was there waiting for her as she stepped off the stage, a proud smile on his face. He had been with her every step of the way, and now, as she looked at him, she knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than herself. She was not just Emily Carter, the woman who had been humiliated. She was Emily Carter, a force for change, and she would continue to make a difference, for herself and for everyone who needed a voice. Emily stood at the front of her office, staring out the window as the sun set over the horizon. It had been a long journey, one filled with challenges and triumphs. But as she reflected on everything she had accomplished, she realized that the path ahead was just as important as the one she had already traveled. Her foundation had grown, reaching more people than she ever imagined, and her voice had become a powerful tool for change. But even with all the success, she knew that the fight was far from over. There were still those who felt unheard, invisible, and powerless. And she